It's now time for your favorite in-depth basketball show with the myths, the legends, Nard Dogg and Raindrops. Goulet!
The NBA Finals are just days away, and we're going to talk about it. Welcome to Full Court Press. It's Justin Raindrops Goulet here with you, and I am joined, as always, by the one and only man, myth, legend, the Nard Dogg, David Bernardi. How goes it, good sir?
It goes pretty good, Goulet. Very, very good.
Excellent. I'm glad to hear that. Now, the NBA Finals are kicking off later on this week. We've got LeBron James going up against Steph Curry. It's the Cavs against the Warriors for the third straight year. And this is a question that you brought up to me, is whether or not this matchup is good for the NBA. Seeing the Cleveland Cavaliers going up against the Golden State Warriors for the third straight season, do you think that's actually good for the league, or do you think it's too repetitive? What are your thoughts on that?
I think this should be the final straw of this finals. I guess this is the final showdown. I feel like it should be the final showdown. If it happens, if it's a fourth straight finals between the Cavs and Warriors next year, I don't think it would be good for the NBA, but I think right now, this finals right now, it's good because it shows who's the better team. It's
a very good point. It's kind of like if you shift over to the world of WWE, Goldberg versus Brock Lesnar, they faced off against each other those 3 times, and don't put them against each other again. That's too much. That's overkill. So you keep the Cavs against the Warriors for a third straight year. They're tied, 1 championship apiece. The Warriors won it 2 years ago, and of course Cleveland won it last season. So now this is that final battle between these two Goliaths, these two giants in the NBA.
But like I said, if it happens a 4th straight season next year, it's like, what's the point of watching the playoffs? What was the point of watching the playoffs this year, to be honest? But
you have a point there, because Golden State swept their way all the way to the NBA Finals. They went
12-0.
Undefeated. Yeah, it's insane. And Cleveland only suffered 1 loss at the hand of the Boston Celtics.
And the only reason they suffered that loss is because they took it easy on the Celtics in that second half. They didn't really take them seriously, and we all saw what happened. That buzzer beater by Avery Bradley.
Yeah, that was the difference. The Celtics won by 3. The only loss for the Cavaliers in the 2017 NBA playoffs was a 3-point loss to the Boston Celtics in the Eastern Conference Finals. It wasn't a blowout or anything like that. It was decided on a buzzer beater by Avery Bradley. But I think this is... I'd like to see variety in the NBA Finals. And we've seen these 2 teams go at it 2 years in a row now. But because things are tied up between these 2 teams, I think it's going to be nice to see a tiebreaker. See who comes out on top. And then have something different next season. Have 2 completely different teams next season. Maybe the Spurs will go back to the NBA Finals. And I think, speaking of the Spurs, they were swept by the Golden State Warriors. Had Kawhi Leonard not been injured, that would have been a much different story, in my opinion.
Yeah, we all saw it happen in Game 1 when the Spurs were up by how much against the Warriors? Then Leonard gets injured, and they blow that huge lead. So you don't know.
Yeah, it's very true. And what do you think about that, as some are saying, dirty shot that Zaza Pachulia took on Kawhi Leonard? Do you think that was a dirty play?
I feel like that play probably happens a lot in the NBA. It's just... I think in the exact same game, LaMarcus Aldridge did the same thing to Curry. But luckily Curry didn't step on Aldridge's foot.
Yeah, there was a lot of people that came out and kind of blasted Pachulia for this. But I watched the footage, and sure, it looks like one thing in slow motion, but I don't think that Pachulia did that intentionally.
Yeah.
And I read a lot of comments that, heavily lean towards the fact, saying that he did do that intentionally, leaning into, or kind of turning away and bumping Kawhi Leonard, so Leonard would land awkwardly like he did. But I don't think that Pachulia did it intentionally. Looking at that footage again, because call the Golden State Warriors whatever you want, but I don't think overall they're a dirty team. Yes, looking at the Warriors, I do think there is one player in particular that He needs to tone things down a little bit. Cough, cough, Mr. Draymond Green. But he really needs to cool it. Some games with the flailing, the flopping, and the kicking his legs out, he's really going to hurt somebody. But that's a different story. When it comes to Zaza Pachulia and Kawhi Leonard, I don't think that Pachulia intended to harm Kawhi Leonard.
And as much as I love Greg Popovich, and he's probably the best coach in NBA history, you can argue, he used to have this player by the name of Bruce Bowen, who is famous for doing exactly what Zaza Pachulia did. We saw back in 2001, the very own Toronto Raptors were off to their best start in franchise history, 29-21. Heading into the All-Star break, their final game was against the Spurs. Before the All-Star break, what does Bruce Bowen? He does the exact same thing that Pachulia did to Vince Carter. And that took Vince Carter out the whole season, and the Raptors obviously struggled to make the playoffs that year. And Bruce Bowen did that to numerous players. He did that to Ray Allen, I believe, and a couple other star NBA players. So the Spurs and Greg Popovich are the last ones to talk about what Zaza Pachulia did.
Yeah, because whether or not it was intentional, it's still happening. Like Bruce Bowen, is a good example. But Popovich just lashed out on Pachulia. He just blasted the guy, and I don't think Pachulia was completely deserving of getting that criticism from Greg Popovich. And I agree with you. Greg Popovich is one of, if not the greatest coach in NBA history. He's an institution in the league. He's been coaching the Spurs since 1994? 96? 96, 97?
96 or 97.
Yeah, it was in late 90s, but he's been with the team for almost, if not 2 decades, and that's incredible. But I don't think Pachulia deserved to be called out the way that he did and receive the hate that he did for what was most likely just an accidental step on his part.
Now, back to the finals. What is your prediction?
You know what? I know he's LeBron James and he's the king, but I really do think I don't know. I don't want to call the Cleveland Cavaliers the underdogs, but I do think that if you had to choose one of the two teams to be labeled as the underdog and the other as the more dominant force, and even though he's LeBron James, he is the top basketball player on the planet, I think the Cavaliers could be the underdogs of this series. And I actually, I know they swept the Toronto Raptors, and that was tough to watch, but the Raptors did not play their best basketball in that series against the Cavs. But if I had to choose one team to win, I'm probably going to be rooting for the Cleveland Cavaliers. And I think, honestly, as great as the Warriors have been, I think the Cavaliers can pull together, and I think they could break that tie between the two teams and come away as NBA champions for the second season in a row.
You're picking the Cavs?
I'm going with the Cavs.
As good as the Cavs are, LeBron, best player in the world, I'm going to have to go with the Warriors. They're just too talented. We all saw the 12-0 record in playoffs. They're too good. I'm picking the Warriors in 5 or 6.
It's not going to be a sweep. I know the Cavs will hand the Warriors at least a couple of losses. I won't be surprised if the Warriors win, and it would be nice to see Kevin Durant win an NBA championship. Whether you love him or hate him, whether you love or hate his decision to join the Golden State Warriors, it would be awesome to see him finally get an NBA championship because he is one of the best players in the last 10 years or so. But it's almost personal preference. I'm not necessarily a huge fan of the Cavaliers, but I'd be happy to see them win a championship, and I think they can. I think they can do it. I think LeBron and if LeBron and Kyrie Irving are playing, especially Kyrie Irving, because LeBron will play. He can play to the top of his ability. He can just turn things on and just dominate. If Kyrie Irving can really step it up and play like he did in some of those matchups against the Raptors in that second round series, then I think they're going to put up a good fight against the Warriors, and they've got a nice chance of winning the NBA championship for the second year in a row.
And here's the thing. I saw it in Game 1, Cleveland versus Boston. The Celtics missed 10 open threes against the Cavs. That's just not going to happen against the Warriors. They have too much three-point shooting for that to happen.
Well, everybody can shoot threes on the Warriors, it seems like. Draymond Green could even hit threes. Of course, they've got the Splash Brothers and Curry and Thompson.
Yeah.
So Cleveland's really going to have to step up their defense because they're not necessarily the best defensive team. And one thing about Cleveland, over the course of the playoffs, and just taking my huge adoration for the Toronto Raptors out of the picture and just looking at Cleveland as a separate basketball team and not just the team that knocked out the Raptors out of the playoffs, I don't mind Lou as a head coach. He's kind of grown on me. I think he's learning a lot as a head coach, and I think he could actually turn into a decent coach in the NBA, and I think he could be with the Cavaliers long term, especially if they win the championship again this season.
Yeah, it's crazy how LeBron's only 32 years old, and Lou's got him that much longer. And yeah, that's about it. I think Warriors are going to take it. They're going to win that third meeting.
I'm choosing Cleveland. It's a personal preference, but I'll be happy if the Warriors win because I do like the Golden State Warriors. I really like Klay Thompson and Steph Curry and Draymond Green for the flops and kicks that he throws out. He actually is a good player. They have a really good team, so I would be happy if the Warriors won. But and in a way, just to choose opposite of what you're choosing, I will stick with the Cleveland Cavaliers winning the championship this season. It's going to be a fun series, though, because it's not going to be a sweep, that's for sure. That's one thing I can almost guarantee that it's not going to be a sweep, these NBA Finals.
Yeah, there really hasn't been that much entertainment in these playoffs.
It has been kind of lackluster, especially with the Warriors and Cavaliers steamrolling their way through to get to the finals.
Yeah, pretty much.
Yeah. Now, the Warriors, of course, they're a super team of, people call them a super team. They've got Klay Thompson, Steph Curry, Draymond Green, and Kevin Durant, of course. And, in years past, recent years, I read this really interesting article online by Doug Smith of the Toronto Star. I will give him the credit there. He was discussing super teams and how people are surprised by these super teams being built in recent years. But in his sub-headline, it says these types of teams have been carrying the NBA for years. And reading this article brought out some really good points. It's true. Super teams have been around since the 80s. Like Magic Johnson, Kareem Abdul-Jabbar, and James Worthy, the Showtime Lakers. That's a super team right there. The Boston Celtics, their main rivals. They got Larry Bird, Kevin McHale, and Robert Parrish, that big three. And then you go over to, the 90s of Michael Jordan, Scottie Pippen, and Dennis Rodman's Chicago Bulls. Yeah. They're all Hall of Famers. That's a super team right there. And even, the San Antonio Spurs, Tim Duncan, Manu Ginobili, Tony Parker, and the Admiral, David Robinson. That's a super team right there. So super teams have been around for a very long time in the NBA. I think I don't know why they're getting more. I don't know why people are making more of a big deal of them these days. Like with the LeBron James, Kyrie Irving, Kevin Love, and then that Golden State Warriors super team. I don't know. It's because it's something that's been done for so many years now, but it seems like some people are treating it like it's this new, fresh thing.
Here's my take on that. You see the Lakers, those 80 Lakers? Mm-hmm. They drafted Magic Johnson. They drafted Kareem. Well, they didn't draft Kareem Abdul-Jabbar, but they got him early. But they drafted James Worthy. The Celtics, he talks about Bird, McHale, Robert Parrish. They were all drafted by the Celtics. He talks about Jordan, Scottie Pippen, Dennis Rodman. Okay, yeah, they drafted Jordan. Well, they traded, They also pretty much drafted Scottie Pippen, but they got Dennis Rodman later in his career, and he was still a stud. He talks about the Spurs. He talks about Duncan, David Robinson, Ginobili, Parker. They drafted every single one of those players. So, I don't know. It's not like Durant, who was a superstar on another team. Or when we go back to LeBron James going to the Heat, plus Chris Bosh, who is also an all-star with the Raptors. He goes to another team, the Heat. See what I'm saying? I don't know.
That, you know what? No, that's now that when you bring it up that way, that makes a lot of sense because the teams that he mentions, even Tim Duncan, David Robinson, Manu Ginobili, Tony Parker, all drafted by the Spurs.
Yeah, I don't understand that.
So no, that is true because these are all super teams that were built from the ground up. But looking at the Golden State Warriors, sure, they drafted Klay Thompson. They drafted Draymond Green. They drafted Steph Curry. But you look at Kevin Durant. Yeah, he was a superstar in his own right, fighting for championships with Russ Westbrook in Oklahoma City. And even LeBron, Bosh, and Wade, the Heat drafted Wade, of course, but LeBron and Bosh took that decision into their own hands and went over to Miami to team up. So I do get what you're saying.
Now, if Doug Smith wants to talk about the Celtics, then he should be talking about the 2007 Celtics where they traded for Garnett and Ray Allen.
Ray Allen, yeah, and with Paul Pierce, yeah, that's a super team, right? That's a super team. You know, I think there are just different types of super teams. Super teams that become super teams. You know, kind of, you know what I'm trying to say? Like super teams that are built from the ground up with these draft picks, and they develop into super teams, into these all-star Hall of Fame players. And then there are the super teams of more, I guess you could say, of the modern era that, you know, that people have been talking about in recent years. These super teams that are built by teams kind of picking and choosing and grabbing these other players from around the league, like with the Golden State Warriors taking, you know, Kevin Durant going over to Golden State and LeBron and Bosh joining Wade in Miami. Yeah, so I do see those differences. That's a very good point, actually.
Even LeBron James coming back to Cleveland to Kyrie Irving and Kevin Love.
Sure, like Cleveland drafted Kyrie Irving, but they didn't draft Kevin Love. That was Minnesota. So
now it's funny because OKC, they could have had a super team with James Harden, Westbrook, and Durant.
Oh, yeah, that was well, of course, the first to go was James Harden over to Houston and see what he's doing there. He's just killing it. He's a stud in Houston. But honestly, I think if Westbrook, Durant, and Harden had stuck together, that for sure would have been a super team. And they could very well have an NBA championship by this point. All three of them could have championships, especially if Serge Ibaka stuck around with them and they kept that four.
So yeah, I don't really understand that article.
Well, you know what? Now that you laid it out that way, it's an interesting perspective, an interesting way to look at it. That does make a lot of sense. Well, we're going to move on to another topic. Can't really think of a smooth, snappy segue. That was just very good points, Nard Dogg. Super teams in the NBA. I like that.
Yeah.
Moving on to another super team, as you could say, the Toronto Raptors. As we mentioned, they were swept by the Cleveland Cavaliers in the second round of these 2017 playoffs. Raptors had an interesting year. Kyle Lowry, of course, was out for a big chunk of the season. What do you think overall of the Toronto Raptors this season? How do you think they performed? How do you think they did overall?
Well, you mentioned the Lowry injury. Now, say Lowry doesn't... I think he missed 20-something games. Now, the Celtics won 2 more games than the Raptors. I think, say, Lowry just missed 10 games. Raptors probably finished first in the East. And we probably talk about the Raptors getting swept or losing in 5 games to the Cavs in a rematch in the conference finals. I don't think the Celtics were the best team in the East. Obviously, we saw that in the conference final.
Yeah, they got whooped by the Cavaliers. Sure, they got that one victory, but as we discussed earlier, it was off a buzzer beater.
I do think the Raptors were the second best team in the East this year. But that's not saying much because the Cavs they obviously steamrolled them in the second round.
Oh yeah, they crushed them.
And yeah, it was just all about talent against the Cavs. Like the Raptors, I think they had a better team. They just didn't match up well against the Cavs this year. Plus, Lowry was obviously out 2 of those games.
Yeah, and having Lowry out did not help. A lot of ups and downs, which is usual for a Raptors season, but they ended the season really well as far as wins go, the regular season, but they couldn't deliver. Even in that first round against Milwaukee, I was a little worried about the Raptors.
Oh, for sure. Even that clinching game, or no, not the clinching game, in Game 5, where they almost blew that, 25-point lead?
Oh my goodness, that was the game. I was lying on the floor watching that. It was so intense, and I was just so frustrated with the team. I was like, come on, pull it together. What are you doing?
And I've loved this 4-year run by the Raptors, the success they've had.
Yeah.
But out of 4 years, I think this season was the least interesting. I just feel like it was just so lackluster the whole season.
Nothing really happened, and to be honest, nothing that this was kind of a forgettable NBA season.
Yeah.
Nothing big really happened this past year, and sure, it's good that we're going to see the Cavaliers and Warriors break their tie in the NBA Finals, but it's the two same teams for the third straight season.
We did see Westbrook's record-breaking season.
Well, as far as single-player stories go, Russell Westbrook's was the best in the NBA, because Russell Westbrook, he just dominated. He rocked it.
I think James Harden, I don't know why I said Kevin Harden, but James Harden, he also had a season as well.
Oh, yeah. And James Harden always delivers. It's
Even, back to the Raptors, DeRozan had an amazing start to the season. He was like Michael Jordan out there.
He had, overall, DeRozan finished with a career year. But I don't know, at least to me, I'm happy that DeRozan had the year that he did. DeMar DeRozan carried the Raptors. He was the best player on the Raptors this season by far. Whereas previous season, Kyle Lowry. But I don't know. It just seemed like this NBA season wasn't all that memorable or wasn't all that special.
And kudos to DeRozan for that All-NBA third team.
That was great. I don't want to completely knock down this season because there were some highlights. There were a lot of highs.
And I love that Ibaka for Terrence Ross trade because you know how I feel about Terrence Ross.
Yeah, you're very excited to see Ross go off to Orlando. Well, and Raptors got PJ Tucker, who's great, and I really hope that the Raptors can lock Tucker down.
Amazing defender.
Oh yeah, he was fantastic. Well, that final game, Game 4 against the Cavaliers, PJ Tucker had his best game in a Raptors uniform.
Yeah, and he didn't really play until that Game 4.
Yeah, so it shows what he can do. So it was almost next season's gonna be interesting.
If the Raptors want to compete against the Cavs, I'm sorry, but they gotta get a third star.
I love Serge Ibaka. I don't think he's that third star to DeMar and Kyle.
I mean, they can probably still keep Ibaka, which is looking like it because apparently there was a wink-wink deal and there's talk about some $20 million a year for Ibaka. Well, it's not that bad of a deal when you look at the deals given out every summer these days.
Yeah. Who do you think Raptors should get rid of during this offseason? And not necessarily should, but who do you think they will get rid of? I know you want them to get rid of DeMarre Carroll. I like DeMarre Carroll personally. Junkyard Dog 2.0. And
he's not a Junkyard 2.0, I'm sorry. Do you want me to rant about DeMarre Carroll?
Go for it. Nard Dogg Unleashed. Go.
This MVP player, he got his big contract with the Raptors. All the amazing deals, signings that Masai Ujiri's made, that is by far the worst one he's made. I just feel like DeMarre Carroll is more about the NBA lifestyle than the actual game of basketball. He cares more about his appearance than he does of actually playing the game. And I can't have a player on the team like that. It's just frustrating. And the amount of times Dwayne Casey would start him and he would play terribly. He would get these wide open three-pointers we saw all season and clank off the rim. It was just losing my mind even talking about it.
So needless to say, you won't be shedding any tears if he's shipped away this offseason.
Can they just buy him out? Because I don't think a guy like that should be on the roster.
Who do you think would be a good fit for the Raptors? Are there any names that pop into your head? Any big stars or any role players?
If they can somehow get Paul George, I don't know how it's going to happen. Jimmy Butler, I don't know if it's going to happen. Gordon Hayward, it's going to be a hard thing to do.
Yeah.
Plus, if they get that third star, they got to surround the team with three-point shooting. Because that's what it's looking like these days. You need a third star in the NBA on your team plus three-point shooting.
Do you think Dwayne Casey's coming back?
Yeah, I think he's coming back. And there's also Larry, who's a free agent. Do they re-sign him, or do they let him go?
Do they let him go and search for another point guard, search for somebody else to help lead the team? Bring James Harden to Toronto. He can play point guard. He does play point guard.
That's not it.
You know, just bring James Harden, DeMarcus Cousins.
You were talking about Raptors I can see getting traded. I think Valanciunas is a possibility. Something about a culture change, I guess trading Valanciunas. He may have played his final game as a Raptor. I like Valanciunas, but it just seems like Casey doesn't really like him that much.
He doesn't play him as much as he maybe should. There could either be a big shakeup in Raptorland during the offseason, or, you know, things could stay the same. But, you know, it seems like some changes need to be made.
Yeah, I don't see Ujiri blowing up the team. I can't see it.
There's no sense blowing up the team and starting from scratch and doing a whole rebuild. I've seen some suggestions that the team should just tank and rebuild. And I was like, no, they've worked too hard to throw everything away and try to rebuild from scratch.
Like, do the Raptors should they just be satisfied that they're one of the top 5, 10 best teams in the NBA? They're playing in an era where LeBron James is just unstoppable. There's nothing you can do.
Yeah.
We're seeing LeBron James going to his 7th straight NBA Finals.
It's unfreaking real. That dude is a beast. He's a monster on the court.
You can put him on the Sixers right now, and they probably win 55 games.
Yeah. I agree.
Put him on the Phoenix Suns, they probably win the same amount.
Yeah.
You put him on the Nets, same result.
I'm excited to see what happens in the NBA during the off season. Of course, what happens in the NBA Finals, but you know what goes down further on as the summer progresses, and see what moves are made. Players that move around the league, just see what happens. Now, keeping it Canadiana, the National Basketball League of Canada. We haven't talked about this league in what feels like a very long time, but they're into their league finals. It's the London Lightning versus the defending champion Halifax Hurricanes. Now, the London Lightning, they've got the NBL Canada's MVP on their roster, and that is Royce White, who had a very brief stint in the NBA, kind of a controversial stint in the NBA. He really clashed with the league over their mental health policies. And he's been thriving in the National Basketball League of Canada. Like I said, he was named the league's MVP, and he helped lead his team all the way to the NBLC Finals against the defending champion Halifax Hurricanes. Now, he's doing great playing for London. And it's awesome to see that. Things didn't really work out in the NBA, but he's really found his groove. Very talented basketball player, so it's nice to see that he's been able to make an impact on the league. What do you think about this? We haven't really talked about NBL Canada in a little while.
I mean, good for him. Some players, they don't do well in the big stage like the NBA. Some players play in Europe, and as we see Royce White, he's playing in Canada, London Lightning, and he's a star. And there was some story about him having a fear of flying or something like that. And it didn't go well in the NBA. Yeah, he was a talented player, undersized power forward, but it's awesome to see that he's doing well in doing something he loves.
Well, and he led the team, he led them to a league best 35-5 regular season. That's a great record. They, like the Golden State Warriors, they swept their way to the NBLC Finals. They beat the Orangeville A's in a best-of-5 first round. They swept them, and they swept the Windsor Express in a best-of-7 second round. And now they're taking on Halifax for a chance to win the National Basketball League of Canada's championship. And it was kind of interesting reading an article regarding Royce White. Check that out online. And he says he loves playing in Canada. He loves living in Canada. But one thing that was interesting, he was named the league's MVP, but he said MVP awards doesn't really matter. He really focuses on that team play, and Lightning coach Kyle Julius says that he really brings that team first mentality to the locker room, which is great because that's what you need in a leader. So it's awesome to see him thriving. Like you said, there's a lot of players, they do really well in Europe if they don't make it in the NBA. But Royce White, he's doing well in Canada, in London. It's awesome.
And it seems like he's enjoying himself and having a time.
Having a time.
Good
there
for
you
him.
go. Yeah, good for him. Now, before we wrap things up, I want to talk about, you probably know who I'm talking about. I want to talk about LeVar Ball. LeVar Ball's AAU team, the Big Ballers, they lost big time to the Compton Magic. They lost 109-57 to the Compton Magic. Now, the Compton Magic are one of the best, if not the best, AAU teams around. But yeah, the Big Ballers just couldn't handle them. Now, LaMelo, one of Lonzo Ball's brothers and one of LeVar Ball's sons, scored 15 points, and things were rough. Things were rough for the Big Ballers. And, of course, there's Lonzo Ball's shoes that are out on the market. Lonzo Ball is probably going to get drafted, most likely will get drafted second overall by the Lakers.
Yeah.
In this year's draft. I think that's going to be super entertaining. I'm honestly excited to watch the fireworks that LeVar Ball causes and just what he talks. Once his son makes it to the NBA, I'm just excited to see what happens because I think it's going to be really entertaining, to be honest.
I think reports came out that Lonzo Ball, he's not even going to practice with the Celtics. So, yeah, it's looking like he's going to be a Laker.
So sure that he's going to be a Laker.
But apparently he's going to practice with the Sixers. But yeah, he's going to the Lakers, and I think he's going to be a really good player in the NBA. It's just, of course, his father, LeVar Ball.
Yeah,
Could be a big distraction.
Yeah, that's to say the least. Well, lots of excitement in the NBA. I know I said it was kind of a not necessarily memorable NBA season, but very much looking forward to these NBA finals to see what happens between Golden State and Cleveland. See who takes away this tiebreaker, because I think it's going to draw huge ratings. It's going to be good for the NBA, but next season it should be different teams, at least one different team.
Yeah.
Because like you said earlier, I agree with you. I don't think it's going to be good to have the Cavaliers and the Warriors face off against each other for a fourth straight season. But the thing is, they earned their spot in the NBA Finals this year because they are the two best teams in the league. The Warriors swept their way to the Finals for a reason. Cleveland essentially swept their way to the Finals for a reason too. They're the two best teams in the NBA. They earned this spot in the Finals, and it's going to be awesome to see them duke it out, to see who the better team is in this NBA Finals. It's going to be very good basketball.
Yeah, I'm just hoping for every single game in this finals to be close.
Yeah.
A blowout will not be good. Not good for the NBA at all.
Yeah.
Every single game go down to the wire, and I think if every game went down to the wire, then a lot of fans would forget about how bad the rest of the playoffs was. Mm-hmm. So let's just hope it's a competitive 7-game final series. Because
that's what people will be talking about, and that's what people will take away from the ending of this season, and that's what people will remember is nail-biters, exciting competitions, exciting basketball between the Golden State Warriors and Cleveland Cavaliers.
You said next year. I think maybe the Western Conference champions will be different, but as we've seen in the past 7 years, it's been only LeBron James. So
yeah. So that's the thing. You're always looking out for who can dethrone the king, if anybody, who can take out LeBron James and the Cleveland Cavaliers, if it's even possible.
Yeah.
Yeah, so we shall see.
Yes, we shall.
Well, that's going to wrap things up for this edition of Full Court Press. Thank you so much for tuning in. Check out our Facebook page, hit the like button, and subscribe on YouTube. And you can also follow me on Twitter at JustinGoulet21. Nard Dogg, where are you at on the Twitter?
You can give me a shout on the Twitter at DavidBernardi7.
Right on, good sir. Well, thank you as always for joining me. Always a pleasure talking basketball with you.
All the time. all this happened, right?
Excellent. Now, before we wrap things up, I do want to dedicate this episode to Treco Bernardi.
Why, thank you.
Yes. The Nard Dogg, you had an amazing dog. He lived a great life living in the Bernardi household. So
He was a beauty.
he sure was. So all the best to you and your family, Nard Dogg. And on to the next episode of Full Court Press. Looking forward to seeing what happens between the Golden State Warriors and Cleveland Cavaliers and what happens going into the off season. Thanks so much for tuning in, and we will catch you next time.
Cheers.
You've just been hit with Full Court Press. Courtesy of the men, the myths, the legends, Nard Dogg and Raindrops.